No pressure.
All right, let's make sure. There we go. Trying to override some of those voices over there. Can everyone hear me? All right. So just so you guys know a little bit about me and what we're here about today is we're here about situational awareness. This is something that you got to take more everyday life, and we're going to discuss that quick through this whole presentation. It's a short presentation. It's only 15 slides, but a lot of information is gathered in these slides. Hopefully, most of it will be beneficial to you and give you some great experience and at least some knowledge base. So who I am, I'm Mark Greczkowski. You can thank my parents for that last name. Most people call me G for short, and it's easy. So you know a little bit about who you're learning from. I am a paramedic. I've been in EMS for 30 years, executive leadership, firefighter, tactical medicine, state instructor. I teach a host of different classes. So putting all this information together with the stuff that's going around will hopefully give you a better understanding of how you can be safer, is basically what it's about. My main passion, my main drive though, is teaching others how to be ready for the emergency situation. It's one thing I love to do. So through that passion and drive, I started my own company called G-Tact, LLC. What this company does is it comes in and assesses and does a threat assessment or needs of what you personally need as a person or as an organization, and we refine it and make sure that you get exactly what you need. So it's very customizable, and that's what we try to do for people. Now, there's three types of people in an emergency situation. The first one are the people that are going to naturally run. Just for their own safety, they run the scene, gone. I don't want to be part of it. They're out of there. The other ones will freeze, right? Some people will just freeze and not know what to do. And that is natural, that happens. That's part of our body's mechanics and mechanisms that you can change. And then the final one is people that are doers. Get right in and do. I will tell you through training, people that may not be doers can become doers just by someone being a leader and directing them what to do. A lot of people don't react to situations. One, fear for litigation. Two, fear of hurting somebody. And three, not knowing what to do. So if someone just gave them guidance, they would immediately know exactly what to do and do it for you. People are very helpful that way. So let's get into it. So situational awareness. This is a new bullet term coming out. And if you Google it and go on the internet, it's the perception of the environment, elements, events, with respect to time, space, comparison of their meaning, blah, 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 blah. A bunch of big words. What does it really mean for you? What it means is you need to scan and process the information around your environment to plan for a potential risk. So we all do this. It's natural. When you came into this room, you did a threat assessment. Okay, so you looked and said, are these people safe for me to be around? And if so, who do I want to sit with? If you came in this meeting and there was someone that you're supposed to owe money to and you didn't want to see him because you didn't have it, you would move over to the other side and go, I'm going to sit over here right now, right? I'm not going to sit next to him because he's going to bring it up. That term's called the threat assessment, and we all do it. But what's important to understand about this is that you need to plan for it, right? No one else but you. You have to plan for it yourself. So when you're in this situation, I want you guys to start thinking, what would I do if something happened? And unfortunately, that's where the world's going. Whether it's natural disasters or man-made, you got to think about that stuff. It's going to crumble. Your plan always does. It's nature. It just happens to everybody. So what's good? This is what I want you to understand is that you're responsible for your own safety and your own survival. Does that make sense, everyone? I mean, you can call EMS. You can call 911, and by the end of this presentation, you'll have a better understanding. But ultimately, if you don't put yourself in that situation, hopefully you won't need someone else to come and help you, right? I mean, that's what we try to do. So an example of that's like when a big storm's coming. We try to evacuate people, right? We try to get them out of that area. People that stay, well, they take a chance. They take a risk. But we do this very wisely with risk versus benefit, right? We weigh everything out in our mind. and we do that with everything we do. Risk versus benefit. So situational awareness, what it does is it teaches you how to kind of do that risk versus benefit a little more intuitive, with some more thought process behind it, because you have more training, more education. So how you will make a difference? What are the things that you will make a difference? First of all is awareness, right? Awareness is the biggest one. Look at your surroundings. Look at where you're going into, that threat assessment. That's what you need to do. You need to be aware. A lot of people nowadays have their faces buried in their cell phone, right? I mean, you guys probably see it all the time. People walking with their cell phone, don't even care where they're going. Well, they're missing a lot of valuable information around them. And that's one of the big problems. Same with hearing, right? People have their big earphones on, jamming out to their music as they're walking down the road. If you're not using all your senses, you're not aware. So you need to use your vision, your sight, all 5 of your senses. So this is a quick video I found that I thought was kind of really dramatic, but this woman, obviously, her cell phone is more important to her than what's on it, and not being aware of the situation. So you watch, she's kind of looking around, not even paying attention, looking at her cell phone, and down she goes. Now that's a pretty big opening, right? I mean, I don't think too many people, I love all the other people standing around there. No one else helps, right? It's like, videotape that one. But that's, I mean, a real tragedy, because this is happening all the time. You know, distraction is the #1 reason for accidents nowadays, is being distracted, not being in the moment. And that's what being aware is, being in the moment you're at now. Okay, so being aware of your situation. The next one is training and education. We're going to talk about a bunch of different classes, but that's what's important, is training education. An example of that. If something happened in this room right now, negative, where would we all go? So if something happened, where would we all go?
That's it.
That door? You'd be amazed how many people would not see that door and would go back towards the door they came in. Why? Because you knew that way worked. You knew that door brought you into where you wanted to go, so you know if you needed to leave quickly, that door would take you outside. Most people wouldn't even see this. There's an example of that, unfortunately, in the Hartford distributorship. Everyone remember that big, massive shooting that happened? Many people actually, instead of going towards doors like that, would walk all the way back to the front of the building where they came in, where their time clock was. And we'll explain why that happens. It's crazy why people do that. It's also the same thing in airports, because there's secured areas. So if something happens in a hangar, like if you're in a hangar, instead of going out the fire exits, what people will do is typically run and try to funnel back that doorway. That's one of the reasons why, I'm sure you all remember the Station nightclub fire, the one that happened on Rhode Island. That's what happened there, is many people actually ran back towards the main entrance. So what this training education does is actually teach you to look around and what's at your disposal. Where's the closest fire extinguisher? Where's the closest AED? So all these different things. So as you're walking in, to start taking in this stuff, and training education teaches you that. You got to teach a different mindset when you do that. And then the final one is tools. There's a lot of tools at our disposal. The main common tools that I like to refer them to is an AED, external automatic defibrillator. This is the device used if your heart stopped. You put 2 little stickers on. You put one here, one here. The heart needs to be in the middle. And you turn that machine on, and you listen to it, and that machine will do all the work for you. Anyone can use it. This other kit that's becoming available is called a bleeding control kit. What the bleeding control kit is, it's actually a kit that has been put together to stop life-threatening bleeding. Why it's important is these kits over here are starting to be put in public places with your AEDs. So where an AED is, the next thing you'll see is a bleeding control kit right next to it. Why they're doing this is to expand your situational awareness, but also for your safety. So what they want to do is give you guys tools. If something should happen and you can't get out, you guys would have the tools with you to handle it before help can get into you. Does that make sense, everyone? So if someone bad came into the building, they wouldn't want to let people out. They want to keep you in there, unfortunately. So what you would have to do is try to hide or try to get out in any way you can. But having these tools, if someone was injured, you'd be able to hopefully help them before you can get them out and get them out, okay? Now understand, I'm not trying to make people paranoid by any means. It's not my thought. I just want you guys to start thinking this way and consider the other classes that we're going to talk about. So situational awareness. This is why we're talking about it. The FBI, between 2014 and 2016, has noticed a 7% increase in violent crimes and a 20% increase in murder rates. That's a staggering number. And I'm not a numbers person, so I wanted to break this down and try to, how do we really look at all these numbers? Realistically, it's everyday headlines, right? Every day you watch the news. Every day you pick up the paper and you're seeing one of these events being publicized. I blame a lot of it on social media, honestly. I think too much of this stuff gets spread around, without all the facts and information. But it's everyday headlines. But I want you to realize this. So first of all, I want you to understand the word trauma. When I use the word trauma, what this means is forces acting outside the body causing injury. Does everyone understand that? It doesn't mean necessarily someone stabbing you or shooting you. It just means forces outside the body acting on you, causing an injury. 100,000 people die annually. Now, unless you're a number statistics person, that doesn't mean a lot. So I wanted to break it down to you so you really have a concept or thought of what that number is. So 214,000 people. It is equivalent to a 747 crashing a day. If a 747 crashed every day, how many people would fly? Nobody, right? No one would be getting on planes. You'd be like, I can walk. Florida? Not a problem. I'll be there in a couple days. But they don't crash every day. And why they don't crash every day is exactly this stuff that we're talking about in this presentation. Airline safety is very, very safe. Very few incidents in airline safety because of stuff they do in this presentation. So, let's talk again, what would be the number one reason why people die? So remember, trauma, force acting outside the body, causing injury. Crimes happen from car accidents, not kitchen knives, lawn mowing, windows. Everyday life, this stuff happens. Everyday life, you can be injured. And this is where people kind of don't think about is everyday life. I don't think something big and bad is going to happen to you. And that's, unfortunately, our mindset. We tend to think that way, right? We tend to think it's not going to happen to me. But you know what? I'm going to guarantee you, you will have an injury or will need emergency medicine someday in your life. Everyone does. So, who do we call when an emergency situation happens? It's easy, right? What's the three numbers? 911, right? Everyone calls 911. Let's get in there. So when you call 911, has anyone here called 911? Yeah? Yeah, I got people. So when you call 911, as soon as you call it, they're going to ask a boatload of questions. Why they're asking you those questions is, first of all, to make sure you're getting the appropriate response. And then the second thing is they are going to give you pre-arrival instructions. Excuse me. So those pre-arrival instructions are going to be so you can help somebody, if you choose to, before EMS arrives. Okay, and they can do everything from CPR to choking to bleeding control. It's a pretty neat system if you actually see it. But what I want you to know about 911, because this is all who we all know to call. Everyone knows to call it. I called 911. That's what you'll hear. Well, here's the key. Does anyone know what the national average is? Anyone know?
7 minutes, 8.
7 minutes? Pretty close. 8 minutes. Now that's a national average, okay? Some places it can be 20 minutes. Some places it can be 2 minutes. The thing about that 8 minutes is, though, that's the time you are potentially going to have to deal with or be a victim of while you're waiting for that. So why is 8 minutes a big number? I mean, why do we worry about 8 minutes? Well, let's break down, first of all, what 8 minutes is, okay? Now, I did a search on the internet, and sometimes the stuff you find is crazy, but interesting, no matter less. So what's 8 minutes? Time it takes to run 1 mile. Now, that is not me. I am not running a minute mile, I'll tell you that right now. 12 minutes? Maybe. An average is the time it takes for a person to run 1 minute mile. Most of us don't run, so I don't think that really sticks in your head. Time it takes to cook a hamburger. Now, I'm not talking about killing it. I'm talking about medium well, like we all like it, 4 minutes each side, you're good. And the last one, now I don't know where they got this number. Time it takes for someone to fall asleep. Now, don't try this during my presentation, but honestly, and if you can't sleep tonight, you can email me, I guess. But it takes me a lot longer than 8 minutes. But what I want you to understand, this is a lot of time. Would everyone agree with that? I mean, this is a lot of time. Why this is so important is right here. Death will occur from bleeding in 3 minutes. Brain death can occur in 4 to 6 minutes. So that 8 minutes that we just talked about, that means 5 minutes, someone's not returning to life because of a simple bleeding emergency that maybe with training you could have easily fixed. And brain death, maybe if you did good compressions while that person was in it, they wouldn't have that brain death and could live a viable life. Does that make sense to people? So that 8 minutes is pretty scary when you think about it. Here's a tidbit, if you guys didn't know. Has anyone ever almost been in a car accident here or been in a car accident? And it seems like real slow motion? Like you're like, and you're like waiting, like, is this thing going to happen? What's actually happening, just so you guys know, is our mind does a pretty amazing thing. Right now, as I'm sitting here boring you to death, you're taking 3 photographs a second and processing that information. Okay, so 3 photos a second. When you are in a situation where we call that fight or flight, fear, like you know something bad is going to happen, it slows down. Your body processes, your mind, 12 images a second. So it seems 4 times longer than it does in real life. So remember that 8 minutes I told you? How long is that going to be to people on the ground realistically? It's going to be 32 minutes that you feel like. And that's a long time. So we want to be very careful with this time, and we want to make sure we use this time wisely. So this time has been referred to what we call the disaster gap. So when we talk about disaster gap, what we're talking about is when an incident happens to EMS arriving right there with you. So there's a lag in time, right? I mean, if something bad happens and you call 911, until EMS gets on scene with you, you're by yourself, and that's called the disaster gap. This time, this disaster gap, is the time that we realize is the most critical time on whether or not how someone will live after the fact. So it's an important time. So I want you to think, what are you going to do in this time if this happens? What would you want someone to do for you, right? And understand, I told you this before, you all will need a 100% guarantee everyone in this room will need emergency medical at some point in their life. Everybody. Even though we don't like to think that way, at some point in our life, someone's going to have to call 911 for us. Now, this disaster gap was, I guess, the time that we all know where this disaster gap worked is what's this? Everyone knows this photo. Unfortunately, the Boston bombing, right? 2 devices detonated. When the 2 devices detonated, they killed 3 people, injured 264 people. No one else died after that 3 people perished from the initial explosion. And why? Because people like you stepped up and made the difference. What initially happened was people started to run. Risk versus benefit, right? Hear a loud bang, you run. Here's a secret. If you ever are walking in a group against somebody and they're all running away from something, probably join them, right? They know something. Typically, a lot of people don't run at once. So if you notice that, you want to run. But what happened was people bottleneck, right? They get stuck. And when they did that, people actually turned around and seen people that needed help and did the risk versus benefit and went back and saved human life. People with no medical training were putting on tourniquets and saving people's lives, stopping their bleeding. It's a pretty amazing story. 267 patients were completely off the scene and in hospitals in 45 minutes. That is an amazing statistic. And it's because of people like you that did it, in all honesty. It wasn't EMS. There's not enough of us to go around. So people were carrying these people, literally putting them in wheelbarrows, putting them on sheets, whatever they could do, and bringing them to the hospital. That's pretty amazing. So let's look at the evidence, where all this stuff comes from, and we'll kind of wrap it up. But the evidence comes from the military has really good statistics. Unfortunately, wartime gives us a lot of these incidents and these numbers. So in World War I, they had 19.1% of their soldiers are dying due to blood loss. And they said, this is unacceptable. How do we fix this number? So with stuff that we've already talked about, they dropped that number to 9.4%. Awareness, training, and tools. So this tool over here is a kit that they give every single soldier, which is called an IFAC kit, Individual First Aid Kit. And what it has is stuff in it that if something happens, he can treat himself. Rather than calling for a medic, he rips open that bag and there's stuff in it for bleeding control. This kit right here is the same kit we're making for civilian use now to hang up in buildings. It's the exact same stuff. What we've realized after all these incidents have happened is that we need to give you the equipment. You can figure out how to use it. Some of them have instructions, cool little pictures. Some of them actually have audible boxes that you hit and it will walk you through the steps, right through it, how to use it. So you're going to see these kits more and more common. You can actually start buying them in some of your stores now. You'll see these kits. They're not cheap, but they do save lives. And they work very, very well. So how do we know? In situational awareness, a lot of people say, how do you know when something's going to happen? Well, first of all, primal instinct and life lesson. Remember we talked about that threat assessment. We've all been there where you've walked in somewhere and you either the hairs on the back of your neck stood up or you got that knot in your belly and you were like, yeah, we're not going to go here today. We're gonna go down the road. Has everyone had that feeling where you just know something's not right? That's a primal instinct. That is something that you know. A life lesson, unfortunately, these are typically painful for us, but example of a life lesson would be like when your parents used to say to you, don't touch the stove, hot, hot. Well, we knew that word. We knew what hot meant, but it wasn't until we put our little fingers on the burner and heard the sizzling and felt the pain, then we said, oh, that's what hot is. So now what we don't do is we don't touch it, right? We go, oh, hot, yeah, no, we know what that means. It's burned in our mind. That's a life lesson, okay? And a lot of times they're painful, unfortunately. And then the second thing is systems and routines, okay? Coffee is the big one. If I took the coffee out of your morning routine, it would mess everything up. Because we all have very systematic routines. And routines are good. Routines are really good because what happens is if a routine works, we use it the same way all the time. An example of a routine or a system is think about when you first started driving, how hard it was to drive a car. How many steps are there? Even to get that car moving. It's like 15, 20 steps. Nowadays, there's probably times you get somewhere and go, oh my gosh, I'm here already? And you drove. Well, that's scary, first of all, you drove, because what does that mean about your awareness level? You weren't even in the moment, right? You were on autopilot. And that's what happens with systems. We go to autopilot. If a system works, we go to autopilot. What happens, though, if the system fails, then it crumbles very quickly. And a lot of people can't get back on track when the system fails. So if you don't have coffee in the morning, that bombs your whole day, right? You just walk in work and you're like, don't even talk to me, right? Right to a coffee machine. But if you're used to being able to say, okay, stop, the system didn't work, what do I need to do to change it? Then you can fix it. What we do as human beings is we put everything in file folders in our mind. Okay, so what we do is if a situation happens, You guys coming to the Rotary meeting today, what you did was you actually went to a file, Rotary meeting, opened it up, and kind of looked at how it was supposed to play out. And you said, okay, yep, this will fit in my day, this is all going to work, I'm going to do it this way. And then you came and you found out, you had me as a guest speaker, you're like, all right, well that wasn't in the last meeting, that's a little bit different. And that's what happened. We look at that files. Systems are good as long as you reanalyze them every once in a while. Does that make sense, everyone? So if a system works, you still want to stop and analyze it. This is where a lot of people make a lot of money, is they come and look at your systems and figure out that your system, but even by changing it a little bit, they can improve it. What we're good at, though, is if we realize something is not right, we realize something is wrong in our system, that's when we stop and analyze. How many times have you all walked into a room and you realize something is not right and you stop immediately? And you're like, oh, why is that strap moved? Something so minute, but you realize because your mind took a lot of this information you thought was useless, but actually has it all processed and cataloged in data, and you realize something is moved. That's your system, okay? So, the biggest one of these two things are how you know. Has anyone ever heard of this before? Alice? You ever heard? And not this.
You can get anything you want at Alice's restaurant.
Does anyone know that song? From Thanksgiving, right? Everyone knows it. Now you're going to be singing on the ride home, being what I want you to do is think about this. So what this is Alice is an analogy for a class you can take. And it's one of the better classes because it gives you simple information. So first thing it says, and I want you to understand that this does not need to be done in any order. Okay? So you don't need to do Alice on the thing. But first is alert. So this is the one that we just talked about, being aware of where you are. Being conscious of where you are. Taking in information, being alert. The second one is lockdown. It means if something bad happens, if you can't get out, you better make sure no one else bad can get in with you. Does that make sense, everybody? So in this situation, if we had to lock down in this room, it would be very difficult. Because if you look, there's too many big open gaps. But what we could do is we could take these tables and stack them up and make a deterrent, right? What happens a lot of times in these big events that's going on is people want easy pickings, okay? So what you want to do is make yourself not an easy picking. So if they get to a door and they try to open a door, if it's locked, they're not going to waste their time opening the door. They're going to feel it, it's locked, they're going to move on. So if you can't lock the door, barricade it. In that area, stack tables up, whatever you can do, but you want to protect yourself until help arrives and get you out safely. Inform. They mean inform that someone in that situation calls, what's the magic number? 911. And give them all the information they can, because the more information they get, the better they can handle the situation. I like to think of inform, though, that you guys take classes and be prepared beforehand to act on that situation. So it's kind of a combination. Because you're not going to be able to have a whole conversation with this person on the phone. You're going to be quiet, you're going to be under stress, you got to think of all these different factors in it. So the next one is counter. I like this word counter rather than encounter. Encounter means you go look for somebody. Counter means they found you and you got to deal with them now. I hate to do this, but I want to burn this in your memory. If you're in a negative situation and you ever counter the bad person, kick the shit out of them. Why? You're fighting for your life. I know that sounds crazy, but you need to take that person down. Does everyone understand that? I mean, it's a negative thing to say. And use tools around you. Fire extinguishers, great things. Chairs, throw stuff at them. What happens in these situations is if you, our natural mechanism, if people throw stuff at us, we protect ourselves. Our hands will automatically go up. And in these situations, you have to do that sometimes. So please protect yourself. And then the last one is evacuate. If you can't get out, get out. And this would be a great time to run that 8-minute mile, right? And if you go out running, make sure if you do go out running, your hands are where people can see them. Does that make sense, everyone? Leave your bags and everything in the room, run out and get out. So, The additional classes you guys can take, which are great classes, and I recommend them for everybody, is CPR, first aid, bleeding control, which is basic bleeding, or BCON, bleeding control class, very short class. A new one is Before Help Arrives, which is by the federal government, and then aggressive training, active aggressive training situation. What all these do is work on your situational awareness and teach you how to deal with this situation so you're not lost or confused if the situation should occur. Now, two things I want to go before I leave. I'm almost done. I just want to give you two things that you can actually, I can train you on right now how to save a life with two things. First one, not awake, not breathing normal. So the first thing you do is if you find someone who's not awake, you try to wake them up. Don't kick them. Just try to shake them, try to arouse them. If they don't arouse, who are you going to call? 911. There you go. Breathing. Breathing normal, we all do it. We all don't care that we're breathing, right? Like everyone in this room is breathing right now, and no one's concerned about it. It's only when we actually think about it do we actually look for it. And what we say when we mean normal breathing is they have chest rise and fall. So every breath they take, they have a breath, okay? If not, everyone knows this song? Hear the beat? All you're going to do is you're going to push hard and fast on the chest, lower part of the breastbone. Literally. It is kitchen. It's better to sing that song than another one bites the dust. That's all I'm saying. Because they're the same beat. But when you do this, basically you just take the heel of the hand, put it on the bottom part of the breastbone, and you just push down hard and fast. Now, a lot of people say, well, am I going to hurt the person? I will tell you that no one has ever been successfully sued for doing CPR on someone else. How cool is that? Right? Nobody. Second thing is, if someone's letting you push on their chest with that much force, they're either going to be dead or they are dead. Okay? Now, when I started teaching this, I thought this was the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Until I was at work one day, remember I was a paramedic, on September 28th, I heard a phone call come in for a commercial property that's a person was unconscious. My father's the one on the right. He worked there. So I texted my father to let him know that he had a medical event going on in his workplace, because my father used to be an EMT. He didn't respond back. I got that gut feeling. Next thing, 5 minutes later, I got the notification that it was my father that was in cardiac arrest. This man, this big guy here, his name is Floyd Flynn, never had any CPR training at all. He just seen a short clip like I showed you guys and looked to see if someone was breathing and had not awake, not breathing, and immediately started doing chest compressions on my father. He did chest compressions for 2 minutes before my father took his first breath. He saved my father's life. Just from hands-only CPR. It works. Okay, and I'm first-hand knowledge of how well it works. So, again, person not awake, not breathing, call 911, start pushing hard and fast on the chest. Have someone grab an AED. The last thing I want to teach is save a life. We all know this. Okay, first thing, it's bleeding. Everyone is so concerned with germs, right? Someone else's blood, ooh, yeah, you're bleeding. Right? That's what I'll tell someone. You point out and go, you're bleeding. Well, first of all, we all know we don't like to lose our blood. Second of all, we all know germs. Here's something you can do. Only thing you want to do is you want to put a layer of protection between your skin and their blood. So, if you don't have gloves, what about put my hand in a plastic bag? Could that be a glove? Yeah, right? Something, a layer of protection, put it between them. What about having the person hold it themselves? Go, wow, you're bleeding. Here's a napkin, hold it on there. Because sometimes people, when they see themselves bleeding, don't know what to do. They even though it's common sense, they forget. So maybe you have to tell them. So the first thing with bleeding is obviously protect yourself. If you do get blood on you, immediately go over to your sink and wash with soap and water. Okay? If you have that spray, we've all seen that spray, the antiseptic spray. You don't have to take a bath in it. Okay? Just a little bit. Clean your skin and then wash it off with regular soap and water. If you do get it in your eyes, though, or in your mouth, or you happen to realize your skin is ripped open, you should go see medical attention for that. But if someone's bleeding, first thing you're going to do is you're going to hold direct pressure. How long are you going to hold direct pressure for? Anyone know? Up to? Until it stops. But it could be up to 8 minutes. 8 minutes to hold direct pressure. If that doesn't work, the next one we're going to go to is what we call wound packing. What wound packing is if someone has a hole in their body, in their legs or their arms, and you try to hold direct pressure and it doesn't stop, what you're going to actually do is you're going to start shoving material in there until you can't shove in anymore. It's going to hurt them, but it's going to save their life because it's going to get to where the bleeding is. Everyone understand that? So you just push it in as much as you can and hold pressure on it. And then the last one is a tourniquet. Now I know a lot of people say, well, tourniquet, and if you put a tourniquet on, you're going to lose a limb. That is not true anymore, okay? It's better to put one on and it not be needed, and we take it off, than it is not to put one on. Does that make sense to everyone? This arm was in a tourniquet for 8 hours. Still my arm, okay, from an accident. So you can put tourniquets on. They should be a last-ditch effort to control bleeding, though. So guys, I'm pretty much done, but I just wanted to kind of emphasize real quick with you guys. Everyone needs to know what to do. I was a paramedic. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've helped thousands of people in my years. 3 years ago, I was on my Harley, and someone pulled out in front of me and put me down on the road. And I was a victim. And I laid there, and basically, thanks to bystanders who stopped, they actually were able to control my injuries and allow me to be here today to teach you and allow me to walk and still have use of this hand, which is a pretty amazing thing. So I thank you guys. All my information is on there. I see your hand up. I'll get to you in 1 sec. If you guys want to call me, you can. My phone number's up there. I'll leave all this information up. This is my voicemail. So
the number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
Would that be nice? But no. So your question?
Yeah, I heard that a person was rendered unconscious that tell whether he actually succumbed or he's unconscious because you just give a light poke in their eye and they react to that, but not put their eye out.
So what he said is to check if someone's conscious is to touch their eye. That is a very, very primal instinct. If someone tries to touch our eye, we'll actually wink. It's a protection mechanism. So what we do is we use that to see if someone's unconscious or not. So if you touch their eye, if their eyelash twitches, that means they're conscious. But they still could be under medication, sure. Especially with the drugs that are coming out nowadays. So the best thing to do is look to see if they're breathing.
I've had occasion to call 911. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
This was for my wife and the panic attack. I called 911. There were exactly 4 cops, 2 fire engines, and 3 ambulances arrived on the scene. Okay? First question is this the case? Who's in charge?
So who's in charge when you call 911? If they're sending the police, panic attacks, I'm sure your wife's a lot different. But sometimes when people have panic attacks, they can do harm to themselves or to others. So the first one who would get on scene is the police, making sure the scene is safe for everyone else to arrive. The one who would actually be in charge is the ambulance that's going to transport them. Because they're the ones who
How
are
do you make a decision when you got 3 of them?
How do you make? I would say, who's in charge and who can I speak to?
The second thing is, when I got to the hospital here just a couple of weeks ago, they gave me an extremely bad time for having my wife drive me to the emergency because I had just chest pain, and I had my wife drive me to the emergency center. They said, hey, you should have called 911. Well, I didn't want to call 911 to create that much havoc, okay? So inherently I learned that if you call 911, the whole friggin' neighborhood, okay, and the whole world all of a sudden is on your doorstep. So I just had her drive me to the thing, and it turned out it was fine. is there any way that when something like this occurs, that you can limit your response to something like that?
So it's all based upon how you're answering the question. You can ask for a limited response, but when they ask you those questions, it's a computer screen that comes up, and it's an international standard on what needs to be sent. One of the things I can tell you is a lot of people say, well, why should I wait 8 minutes for EMS to arrive on scene when I can drive myself and be there in 3 or 4? Well, the thing is, first of all, in a stressful situation, someone driving typically is not going to be aware of their surroundings and just going to drive fast. If something negative does happen, what are they going to do? Right? Now they're stuck on 95, and a lot of people won't even know where they are. How frequently that happens, that we're chasing the highway trying to find this car. One of the things that's good about 911, and why you're getting so many ambulances, and that's why a lot of people ask, is because ambulances have certain equipment, and most of the calls generally for EMS are what we call basic. So they don't need to have a higher level of care. They have a stretcher and they have life-saving equipment. But if you're having, like, let's say, a heart attack, we need specialized equipment that we can get out to you. The other thing is, too, that people don't realize is we will transport you to the best hospital that can deal with your situation. An example of that is, let's say something happened up here on 95. You may not go to L&M. We may actually end up taking you to Bacchus because they have a trauma surgeon that can take you right in the OR. Where you could be in Norwich, Connecticut, and having chest pain, and we may take you all the way to L&M because they have a cath lab. So what we do is we try to get you to the place that is going to be able to handle you the most effectively and best care that you require to give you the best means of life.
That's my question. Who makes that decision?